What's up, everyone? This is Dell with From Seed to Spoon, and we are following up on the video that we did with my friend John a couple days ago. So, if you missed that video, John is one of my friends and reached out to me about wanting to start growing food, and we kind of had this idea of just documenting the process together. So, we were having phone calls, talking about different stuff, and we wanted to kind of bring everyone along with us through his journey of starting out. So, if you missed the first video, go check out the video from a couple days ago where we talk about what John's goals are, why he's wanting to grow, what he's wanting to grow, and all of that. And so since then, John went to the store. He went to Home Depot, I think, and bought some different ingredients that we talked through. And and he also ordered some smart pots through our store. So now we're gonna go through and he's gonna plant this stuff, and we're just gonna talk through it. So, John, you want to kind of give everyone an update on what you did since we last talked?
Yeah, so I went to Home Depot and I got some starters. All right, it's good. Ruby, my dog's out in the garage. She's all right, getting put inside. All right, Ruby, come on. All right, where were we? Went to Home Depot. Yeah. Got some starter plants, and so I've got basil, sage, thyme, dill, oregano, and then a red and a sweet onion slip. I learned they're called it a sprout, and the guy called it a slip back, so it felt real good. Also got this stuff, fish fertilizer that my dog loves. Smells real good. Worm castings, which I think is fertilizer. You said these are both fertilizers, and then a couple bags of Kellogg potting mix.
So let's talk through one of the questions you had at the store, because you called me. The first question, I think, was which potting mix do I get? Because there were a lot of different bags.
Right. Yeah.
So the strategy that we were looking for there basically was there were 3 different bags of that Kellogg product. One of them had more vermiculite than the others. So one had no vermiculite, another one had some, and then this one had most. The potting mix, it was called potting mix. That was an indicator that was the one we should go with. The more vermiculite that you have, the better drainage you're going to have with your soil, and the better it's going to be able to handle both too much water and too little water, because that vermiculite acts as like a sponge where it soaks up water and releases it. So if you're out there not sure which potting mix to get or whatever at the store, just look for something that says potting mix that has the little white flakes in it. And then the worm castings and the fish fertilizer, those are going to be the fertilizers that we're using for the plants as well. The worm castings are it's a great source of like an all-around fertilizer, and it also has growth hormones for plants in it. So we'll put that in when we first plant. And then the fish fertilizer will be added about every 2 weeks. We'll make a little mixture with some water and a watering can, and then just sprinkle that on the plants like every 2 to 3 weeks. So that's what those different things are for. So yeah, John, you want to show? So let's go ahead and start with one of the smart pots. You have 2 5-gallons and 1 mini, right?
Yeah, I got a 5-pack of the smart pots, so this is one of the 5-gallon ones, just like a little bag with the handle. Very convenient.
I'm glad you got the ones with the handles. I think we only carry the ones with handles in our store, just because the ones without handles, it's just so much nicer being able to have the handles and move them around.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, so I got 5 of those, and then one of these. They're called big bag minis. It's kind of just like a wider 5-gallon. It kind of looks like. Maybe the 5-gallon's a little taller, but I think you said that
15, if I remember right. I think that's 15, and then the junior is 25, and then there's 15, 25, and 50 are the 3 different kinds of those big bags.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, this one's a 15.
So the strategy we were going with on these, so John wanted to grow a variety of herbs and then a bunch of onions and garlic and stuff like that. So the herbs are going to go in the smart pots, and we're going to have some of them on their own and then some of them kind of mixed together, and we'll go through that as we go. And then the mini is going to be where all the onions and garlic go, because onions and garlic do not need a ton of vertical height in the soil, if you will. And they grow really well in those minis. So we'll have chives, onions, and garlic and all of that in those minis. So what do you want to start with, John?
Well, so the other thing I got today, because I was getting groceries and they were totally out of herbs, because that's what you need to fight off the apocalypse. So I got this other larger basil plant, because I didn't know if I could pull from this one yet, being so young. So I don't know if I can use one or both of those for this, or if one is better than the other. This one's obviously more developed than this one.
Yeah, so one thing that we could do is that larger basil plant probably has too many basil plants like next to each other for that amount of space. So we'll need to thin them down. But basil is easily propagated. So we can basically take a cutting off that basil. You can stick it in a cup of water, it'll grow roots, and then you can plant that and you'll have a new basil plant. So you could
Okay.
so we could do that with that basil. Another thing is it's too cold to get basil outside right now. It is, all the other herbs are going to be okay, but basil is super tender and doesn't like anything below about 50 degrees. So our daytime temperatures are going to be okay for the next week, but our nighttime temperatures are going to be too low. And then also we're going to have at least, it looks like we may have another freeze here in a couple weeks potentially.
Okay.
So, but that's a great thing about these smart pots is you can just move the basil outside, once we hit like 10, 11 o'clock, and then it's outside until you just got to remember to bring it back in. So,
Okay.
So that's the thing I want to mention on the basil. Everything else should be okay just to be outside. If we get, it doesn't look like we're gonna have a freeze in the next week, but if we get a sudden like cold snap, you may want to bring it in for that, just to like help protect it a little bit until it gets acclimated. But based on what the weather looks like right now, I think we're okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab one of those herbs, maybe.
Yeah, start with one of these.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the sage, let's start there, maybe.
Sure.
All right. Can you come in closer to the camera for a second and show them the sage?
Yeah.
And it's cool.
Look at this little guy.
There she is. He is.
It is. Yeah. So the other thing I did that you recommended was, because I knew I wasn't going to plant them, I put them in this cake pan, you said, and I filled it with an inch or so of water. And you can tell today, like the soil is completely saturated. So it just drank it up.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me of that. So yesterday, John bought these plants, and he wasn't sure what to do with them until we planted. So I told him to put them inside of a cake pan, and then fill that cake pan with water. And the reason for that is you want those roots to be fully saturated and not thirsty for water whenever they get planted. And then whenever you plant, you want to also make sure that what you planted in is also fully saturated. So this just helps with that and makes sure that these plants have plenty of water before they're planted. They're not going to be stressed out. They are good to go as far as water is concerned. I do want to mention you should never leave plants in water like this for a long time. That will contribute. A lot of issues will come up from that, from fungus gnats to root rot to bacteria, mold, and just all sorts of bad things can happen if you leave plants in water. So that's not a good thing. But when you're in this situation where you're about to plant, then it's a good thing to do. So
long time being like a couple days or more than a day?
Yeah, I wouldn't do more than 2 to 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah, and even that, like, really, I'm only doing it for like a day or two. There's other situations where I do a similar thing where I will put the smart pot inside of a kiddie pool, and it's basically the exact same principle happening. And I'll put like 2 inches of water in there, and then it'll soak the water, from below.
Right.
I hear a kid screaming in the background. Can you hear that, or is it just me? It's my kid, but I don't know if y'all can hear it through. Okay, cool.
No, I was like, you shouldn't hear. You shouldn't hear
it's one of mine. No,
something is terribly wrong.
No, there's 4 of them here, so there's usually at least one of them screaming or laughing loudly throughout the day at some point. So. Okay, so let's get that sage planted. So I would just fill up that smart pot with the bag soil that you've got. Okay. I'm gonna use my hands.
Like pretty much to the top?
Yeah, I would leave like 2 inches from the top. And what I do is I fold the sides down about like an inch, so that handle will be folded down, and then it builds like a more of a ridge, you know, and it just
fold it
seems
out like this.
Yeah, and then fold it all down like that.
Okay.
And then once you have soil in there, like it kind of, and then that's what I do with mine, and it makes it to where they seem to last a little bit longer. Like the edges don't start fraying as quickly, and what this also does is it makes it to where I have plenty of space to add mulch, because as it starts to get hotter in the summer, it helps to add in like leaf mulch and wood chip mulch. So when it gets hot in the summer, I'll just unfold it back out and then now I got space for the mulch, and I just put it in there.
So it leaves you a little space on top.
Yeah.
Okay. So something like, I don't know, how well can you see this?
I mean, I can see it okay, I think. Can you bring it a little closer
Okay.
and just hold it up to the camera? And
Yeah. So right now I'm like kind of close to the top.
I would do maybe like one more scoopful that you were doing, and then I think, and then we're gonna mix in some of those worm castings too. All right, so now get that bag of worm castings. And
am I gonna not want to use my hands for this, or?
Oh, it's fine. It's my hands are always in worm poop. I have my own philosophies about how it's good for you, but we won't go into too much of that. So I mean, like when we use worm castings we have a little worm farm where we make our own. Well, the worms make it, but anyway, we're typically like taking like one little like Earl's cup, you know, those like cups that Fuzzy's has and Earl's and all this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, about one of those. So that's probably about 2 cups full.
Okay.
And just take that and just mix it into like the top 6 inches of that pot.
Okay. So like a large glass full.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like 2 cups probably, you know.
So did you call that like one?
That was probably a good amount. And this is really like just to start off a new one. This is a lot of worm castings, but I don't know how much life is in that bag of soil that's been sitting at Home Depot for I don't know how long. You know what I mean? Like,
gotcha.
And we really want to get a bunch of microbial life into this and just get that kick-started. And then once we start growing, more life will develop in there, and we'll have a good little ecosystem going. But this just helps kind of kickstart that and gives the plants, you know, some nutrition. And you can't overdo it on worm castings. It can't hurt the plant at all. So, you know, if you're making your own soil mix from your own compost and stuff like that, then I don't think you have to have this much as much worm castings as this, right? But when you're buying bag soil, then I say let's throw a bunch of worm castings in there and get it going, and make sure you have plenty, because you can't it's not like chemical fertilizer where you can overdo it and really hurt things. You know, it's just worm poop. You can't put too much in there. So okay. So now take the sage out of the container, and can you bring it over here to the camera? And I want to see what the roots look like on that. Yeah. Because if it's been in that container too long and it's starting to get root bound, then we need to help those roots have a better chance of success in this. Yep. So I'm already seeing it. See that circling at the bottom? So people think, here, hold it down a little bit in the camera. There you go. So people think you have to be really gentle with roots and stuff, and you don't. In fact, I would just take, so typically I'm dealing with larger plants, and I have a saw, and I just cut off like the bottom inch of the roots, but that's small enough that you could just rip off. So just rip off the bottom inch of that whole thing.
Like all the dirt too? Yeah. Pull all this stuff off?
Yeah, a little bit lower. There you go. Yeah, just rip all that off. There you go. And now like go through and gently rake the sides to help those roots kind of go outward, because what's happening is those roots are being trained to grow in a circle, and you've got to help them understand that they don't have to do that now. So you kind of like, you break them up and get them, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, you're doing a good job. Almost imagine like, I wish I had one with me in here I could show you. But yeah, that's basically what you need to do. Just go through, and this one isn't super bad. So I think what you've done so far is probably good enough. Maybe one of these other ones we'll see will be way more root bound, and we'll have to do some more work. Sometimes when they're circling, you just literally cut it and cut like half an inch around the whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you can make a spot in that smart pot in the middle with your hand and make it the size of that to fit down into perfectly, basically. And now you want to like move the soil in around it, but and kind of pack it in gently, but don't press in like really hard. One mistake that some people make is they really pack it in tight, and that causes problems because now moisture and like water and air aren't able to make it down into the roots because everything's packed tight, right? So you just want to get it in there nice, and then then when we water this, you're gonna water it really, really well, and that is going to help solidify everything naturally, right? So, all right, so your sage is planted. That is all there is.
Sweet.
One down.
All right.
All right, let's look at what else we have left because we want to think about what all we want to put together and what's going to be separate. You've got I see two basil. What else do you have in there?
Thyme, oregano, dill, and then the 2 onions.
Okay, so I think let's just put the thyme, oregano, and dill all in their own individual containers.
Okay. So then you one more 5-gallon.
Yeah. You could, so thyme and oregano would go together in like a 10-gallon together pretty well. And they may even go together in a 5-gallon pretty well for half a year. But eventually they'll start to crowd each other out and they'll want their own space. So I think for your situation, I would keep them separate. But it is nice for some people to have like a 20-gallon smart pot or a mini that has like 3 or 4 different herbs in it. And oregano and thyme are both herbs that go safely in arrangement like that without taking over. Because some herbs you wouldn't want to do that with sage probably. Sage is going to become this big bush, and it's going to crowd out everything around it. Thyme and oregano are both going to stay like down near to the ground, and they're not going to get real big. I mean, they're going to get kind of bushy sideways, but they're not going to take over in a hurry like sage would. Same with rosemary. Rosemary is going to become like a big bush. You don't want that like. You got to think about that as you're building it. So like if you wanted to have an herb garden with like a mini, then you would have like thyme, oregano, basil, and chives are all friendly to have around each other because they're all going to grow around the same height generally. You know what I mean? Basil's going to get kind of big. You're going to keep that snipped down. So anyway, there's just like a strategy around how this stuff is kind of planted together. And I think everything you have so far, I would just plant in its own individual. When we get to the basil, we'll kind of figure out what we're going to do from there because I think we're going to end up propagating a lot out to make new plants for you.
So will this sage fill up? It'll fill up this 5-gallon. Does it ever need to be moved? Will it just stop its growth at the 5-gallon root limit, or does it need to be moved into a bigger pot?
It would definitely appreciate being moved into a 10-gallon here in a year or two. It would like that as a birthday present.
Okay.
So, I mean, you'll be able to tell, I mean, like, because the roots are going to start coming out the side of that smart pot on the sides. And like little, you know what I mean? And once I start to see that happening, I'm like, oh, okay, well, the roots have hit there now. Time to go to a bigger pot, right? And I just keep doing that until, and I don't think I've seen them come to the sides in a 15 or 20-gallon yet. But I don't have anything huge in there yet. So I know eventually they would if it was like a big tree or something. But that's kind of how I, gauge all of that. But 5 gallons will be a really good size for that. And technically you could leave it in there for a long time. It's just, I don't know. I like to be as efficient as possible. And if I know it's going to do better in a bigger one, I'm just going to pot it.
You're going to start it in the bigger one?
No, I'll start. No, what I'm saying is I want to make sure that like if the plant can get bigger, if it has certain conditions, I let it get bigger. So I'll keep up potting it into bigger ones.
Gotcha.
But it's good to start them in this size so you're not wasting all that soil on a small plant, right?
Right.
So which one are you planting now?
Whatever you think's best. Just one of the herbs besides basil. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, so the oregano or the thyme, either one, they're going to be planted the same way. Let's I'll wait till you get done with that, but we'll check out the roots on those and see if any of those need to be thinned down a little bit more.
Okay. So I've used about half a bag of this for 2, just for if people are wondering how much to get. So I have 3 bags of this potting mix, and it looks like probably use about 2.5 of the 3 based on this.
That was the 40 quart bag, right?
44 liters, 40 quart, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, measurements help, don't they? That does help tell you how to measure stuff.
Okay, that one shouldn't be root bound at all. It looks pretty small. I think that one will be okay. Yeah. We'll check it out though. Yeah.
So the tarp is a good idea because dripping black soil everywhere. So pro tip.
Yeah. And one thing that you did a great job of was choosing the right plants. So a lot of people, when they go to the nursery, they look for like the biggest plant. And that's not usually the best thing to do, because that means that plant is bigger than it should be for that container, and it's probably root bound already. So the smaller the plant, the better off it's going to handle transplanting, and the better off you're going to be. Now,
so what I did is I picked randomly, and then I got these. So, but now everyone else knows. So how does this? Because there's some that are bunching up here, but not a ton.
I come a little bit closer. I can't really see that. Yeah, so I would pull that off then, the bottom inch of it. I pretty much do that on every single plant that that's like, it's like habit now. Like I pull a plant out, I rip off the bottom, and it's just like, you know what I mean?
Right. So you think this looks good otherwise?
Oh yeah, it looks great. Yeah, that plant's gonna do great because it's a perfect size for transplant from that container.
Okay, so first I need to put in the worm castings.
Yep. Yeah, mix all those in to the first like six inches or so, like 3 to 4 or 6 inches. What you're doing is great. That's basically it.
This potty mix smells good. It smells like nature.
How far are you away from starting a worm farm now, John?
Now that I know about it, just tell me how to. I mean, send me the links, man.
There's 2 different ways you can go about it. There's a product you can buy that we have on our back porch that's called a worm factory, that has like all these different layers the worms can go through, so you can have different like rotations going. There's also like, you can just take a plastic tote and drill holes in it, and then that's a worm farm. So you can just do that. We've got a guide I'll send you that I'll link to in this video that goes into the detail. But I mean, after all it took was me spending like $20 or $30 on worm poop to be like, all right, I'm not buying this anymore. I'm just gonna make it. And it's fun. It's cool because all your kitchen scraps are going to use. You're not like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you don't think you're wasting anything.
So these worm castings, will I continually use this, or is this only for the first plant and then we do the fish fertilizer?
Yeah, I typically put the worm castings in at like first planting, and that's it, unless it's something that's going to be long lived. So like that, I mean, like those herbs, for example, like you might refresh with some new worm castings in the fall. You know, like once summer's over. Obviously that was, but once the heat of summer is gone, you don't want to fertilize when it's super hot. So some of those you'll apply like another application to, but typically it's just like at planting, and then, you know, you would do like in the spring and in the fall. But we also do compost. So compost and worm castings pretty much go hand in hand. Worm castings just have a little more nutrients than compost. I don't even know if you'd say nutrients. I think that the big thing about worm castings is they have plant growth hormones in them. So, and it's really nature's like perfect fertilizer is worm poop. Makes sense, right? So
yeah.
And I mean, the way that you like, I mentioned kind of briefly the tote. Let me just kind of go through like quickly what you would do. So you would take like any size tote, drill holes all around it so plenty of air can get in, And then the worms need some bedding. So we use our junk mail. We don't hate junk mail anymore because we shred it. And that becomes the bedding for the worms. And then we throw in a bunch of coffee grounds because the worms use that to help kind of digest. We put in like a couple scoops of compost so there's some soil in there to get them going. And then from there, it's just like a bunch of kitchen scraps and just keep throwing that stuff in. And then it only takes them a month or two to maybe 2 to 3 months to take all that stuff and turn it into basically what's in that bag right now.
Can you transplant worm farms?
Do we what?
Can you transplant a worm farm?
It's portable. We've taken it to the Home and Garden Show a few times. So
okay. Well, I'm saying like, can you like break me off a piece of your worm farm and kickstart like that?
Yes, I'm happy to loan you or just to give you some of my. You don't have to give them back. Some of my worms. I'll have to talk to Mary though, because technically my 4-year-old is the keeper of the worm farm. She is the worm farmer.
Okay. Nice.
I think she'll be happy to share her worms.
So let me know the day rate.
This is dill, and I have to look dill up in the app because I have not grown it much, and I want to make sure I'm giving you the right info on it. So 1 moment.
Oh wow, there's a lot of. We wrapped up all the way around.
Okay, it's a little early on dill too. It looks like it's a little more tender. It doesn't like the cold, so I would treat this the same way you're treating the basil.
So pretty wrapped up around the sides.
Yeah, but those roots aren't super fibrous and thick. Like they're thin, you know? So that's not as big of a deal. Like I would still break them up and stuff, but it's not bad. When it gets bad is when you have like the thick roots that are going around.
So just still take off this bottom part?
Sides. Yeah, and I would like on the sides, I would just kind of rake through on the sides with your fingers. Like imagine your fingers are a makeshift fork and you're going through and kind of just raking that stuff out. So yeah, dill doesn't like the cold. So I would treat that the same way that we were talking about treating basil. We were bringing that in.
Oh, I'm losing one. Get back in there. Okay. How's that?
Yeah, that's good.
So how often are you planning new things? Are you mostly in maintenance mode, other than things that obviously last one season at a time?
Oh, I'm planting all the time. It's my therapy. Like whenever I get stressed, I just go out and like, I'm going to plant something now. So
it feels pretty good. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. I bought a
one with nature.
I bought a 5-pound bag of cilantro like a month ago. And whenever I get stressed, I just go out and start throwing seeds everywhere. And, never know where cilantro is going to end up.
So a friend of mine is kind of following us, and he went out and bought seed. So is there anything that he should know differently from starting from seed now versus starting from plants?
Yeah, and it's different for every plant. So some plants are difficult to start from seed, like a lot of these herbs, in fact, like oregano, thyme, rosemary, sage, are not only difficult to start from seed, but a number of the varieties that people grow, like you can't really grow from seed because they've been bred down for a long time, and you have to have like a cutting of that original one in order to grow that. So we're not really starting any of these herbs from seed aside from basil. I think dill would be pretty easy to start from seed as well. That's pretty much it out of the stuff. And chives, you can start from seed pretty easy as well. But everything else, we're starting from transplant on these herbs. Now, when you get into the vegetables, then most all of those can be started from seed really easy. So broccoli, kale, spinach, lettuce, all of that stuff, you can just go throw seeds in the ground right now, and it'd be a great time for it. In fact, we're getting on the back end of the season for spinach, and it's almost getting it's gonna be too warm for it. Peas too, like beans, all of those things, and do better from seed than they do from transplant. So Once you get into the vegetables, it becomes a little bit different. But the herbs, a lot of those we're buying as transplants. I want to give a shout out to a nursery down in Norman, Prairie Wind Nursery, because he specializes in cooking herbs, and he carries way more variety than I've seen anywhere else. So he has like 14 types of basil and 8 different types of oregano, and just all these different varieties. And the first time I went down there, I spent like 3 hours just tasting all of it, and my mouth tasted like a million different things by the time I left. But it was awesome, and we've done a number of presentations with him on our YouTube channel. If you search for Bill Ferris or search for herbs, then you'll see a bunch of those where we talk about like all the different herbs that he has down there and all the different ones that I've learned about. And the cool thing is there's like alternatives. So for cilantro, for example, when it gets too hot, cilantro isn't going to grow anymore in the summer. It's going to bolt and go to seed. But there's a plant called Vietnamese cilantro that tastes like cilantro that does really well in the heat. So you can switch to that in the summer. And there's all sorts of other little tricks like that I've learned from him. So check out, if you're looking at our YouTube channel, just search for herbs or Bill Ferris. You'll find a bunch of presentations we've given together at home and garden shows and other events talking about this kind of stuff. But it's Prairie Wind Nursery down in Norman, Oklahoma. What is that? Is that I can't really see.
This is oregano.
Is that Greek or Italian?
Italian.
Awesome. So Italian oregano is the mild one. The Greek really is more of like the strong, like pizza flavor that can overpower. The Italian's a great one to start with because it isn't near as strong. Those roots look great. I think that one's going to be good. Another thing that I want to talk about with oregano and with basil is that both of those help out things like tomatoes if they're planted in the same container. So if you have like a tomato and it's like a 20-gallon smart pot or a big one or 15, and you put this oregano or basil kind of on the side of it, it will help protect that tomato from pests, because pests find what they're looking for through their sense of smell, and they're detecting different chemicals in the air. And these herbs being planted next to that tomato just put up some distractions. Basically, it's camouflage, if you will, for your tomato.
Do any of the flavors of the herbs get imparted in the tomato?
So basil actually improves the flavor of tomatoes. It doesn't impart the basil flavor into the tomato, but it improves the flavor of the tomato itself.
Oh, interesting.
And oregano has also been shown to improve different plants that are grown around it. If you've heard the phrase companion planting, that's what all of this is like some plants help other plants, and these herbs are the things that help more than anything, are like basil and oregano and rosemary and sage and thyme and all of these. So in our gardens out in the backyard, we have them planted like mixed all around, where we're just like interplanting these everywhere. And I'm almost like planting them as like decorations all around the yard, just because they bring in a bunch of like beneficial insects too. So the giant bumblebees that are super friendly, like I've gotten close enough to pet them and they don't care. Like they will not attack. They love these plants. So we always have those around our backyard. Honeybees too. So honeybees are native to Europe, and these plants are native to Europe. So when they find them, they love it because it's in their instinct to love these plants. So you'll have a lot of those around. It's just these plants are just awesome. They really help out your vegetables as well. All right, so we've got most everything planted. We're down now to basil and then the onions, right? And the garlic?
Right.
Okay, so let's can you grab the big basil plant and bring it up to the camera, and let's look at that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of basil plants in there together, and there's only supposed to be one that's is there. So what we're going to do is each one of those extra ones we can cut and then put in a jar of water, and the roots will develop over like 3 or 4 days, maybe 5. Okay. You'll start to have little roots develop, and then you can take those and plant them elsewhere. And I don't know where. We don't have enough containers right now, but at least that won't waste them. You could also just use those, like if you wanted to. But I mean, yeah, it's up to you. But we want to get down to where there's only one. Like take the healthiest, best looking one, leave that, and then all the rest are getting cut.
Okay. What do you think about this tiny one?
That's great. Now again, we have too many in there, so there's 2, 3 in there. Yeah. So I would cut it down to just the best one, and then the other ones you could either propagate or you could use.
Okay. So does it matter if I use one of these smaller ones versus, is it better to use the more established, bigger plant?
Can you bring it back over to the camera again? Let me look at it, because you kind of. So there's a couple things you want to look at. One is like which one is like on the smaller ones. Look at the smaller ones first. On the so like usually I'm going for the one that's more in the center of the pot. If it also looks like one of the healthier ones, those 3 all look about equally healthy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I would just go with the one in the center of the pot. That's just because I think the roots will be least disturbed by everything that's about to happen to it.
Okay. And so when you say, so you're just going to cut these just where they're visible towards the bottom?
Yeah, just right at the bottom. Just cut them right there and leave the roots in there, because you don't want to disturb the roots. You just want to cut it right at the base. And then you can take that one that you cut and either put it in water and let roots develop, or you can eat it, use it.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't worry about the roots on that one, because those roots are probably going to be coming from the other ones, and
right,
it's not big enough for it to be causing a big problem yet. Dog got to come back out, huh?
Yeah. See if she barks at people walking by.
What's her name?
Ruby.
Hey, Ruby.
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Ruby.
I heard you through my AirPods.
Oh, yeah, she can't hear. Well, I guess she probably could hear that. Dogs have really good hearing.
Yeah. Okay. Just gotta remember which one's in the middle, I guess. I guess it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, at that size, I think they're going to be okay.
As you say cut, is that just because it's the least disturbing as opposed to snapping or anything like that?
Yeah.
All right.
You could like pinch that, but there's a chance of you like pulling the roots and
right.
Yeah. Pinching is probably fine on basil, but when it comes to thyme or rosemary, you're not going to be able to just like pull that off. Like just pinch it right off without damaging the plant potentially.
Okay. This guy's looking a little wilty. My confidence is not very high.
Oh, it'll be okay. It's just how cold is it in the garage right now? What's it like outside? I haven't even been outside.
It's like 60-ish, but they've only been out here for 30 minutes or so. They've been inside.
Yeah, it'll be okay. Just like you just want to make sure you fully douse all of those smart pots. Like get them completely saturated.
Okay.
If you have a kiddie pool or something that would collect water, it'd be worth or if you have a flooded part of your yard, just go set it in there. That's what I did with one of mine the other day.
Yeah, I could definitely do either. So I tried to collect some rainwater from yesterday.
Awesome.
I don't know does rainwater have different chemicals or better properties than just like tap water?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different stuff on the internet about this. And if you look on the internet, you're going to see stuff that says both sides of it. From my personal experience, though, and I think anyone that's garden will tell you that if your plants get watered from a rain, they respond way differently than if you water them just from the tap, right? So I think there's a couple of things going on here. I think number one, it has been proven that plants respond to water that is the same temperature as them way better than if it's colder. So water that comes out of the tap is going to be like 20 to 30 degrees colder at least than the air temperature. So that shocks the plant a little bit, right? So rainwater is already should be around the same, so that helps. Another thing that has been proven is that if the rain is falling when lightning is happening around at the same
I've heard
time,
that.
yeah, then lightning can help infuse nitrogen into it by ripping apart. I mean, I'm getting them over my head now, but the point is lightning makes, So, so I don't know. I definitely have seen the difference, and I have a giant rainwater collection that I use in my backyard. And anytime I fertilize plants, I mix it from that water, and that's what I've always done. And I've seen the results. So I wouldn't necessarily say tap water is bad. I think that one thing that I did before I had my rainwater collection was I had a lot of buckets filled up with tap water that I would like just leave out for a day, so they would become equalized with temperature, right?
Yeah.
Also, if you leave rainwater out in the sun, it will get rid of the chlorine in the water after like a day. So there's inconclusive evidence about whether or not chlorine causes a problem, with stuff like that. So, so yeah, that's kind of my spiel on rainwater. I think that you can clearly see the results after a rain, as opposed to you watering yourself. So,
is there a period of time where water that's been sitting out goes bad?
Well, I mean, if there was bacteria in it, and then you saw mold, I mean, like green stuff in it, or if it turned like, then it could. This kind of gets us into this whole other topic about. So there's these theories of compost tea and worm tea, where you take those worm castings that you have, you put like 2 cups in a thing of water, and then you stir it a couple times a day and let it sit for like 3 days. And then you take that water and then use that on your plants as a liquid fertilizer. And then if you don't do a good enough job of stirring it, then that can develop like bad bacteria. Like I basically made a 55-gallon batch of E. coli once accidentally. So you've got, because I was adding molasses into it and all this stuff. So I got really deep into all of that, and what I ended up kind of learning through it all was I don't think there's much difference between doing that and just putting compost and worm castings on the soil and just letting it rain.
Yeah.
And because even if you do, because the whole like theory behind this is you're producing a bunch of bacteria. And if you do it right, you produce a bunch of good bacteria. If you do it wrong, you produce a bunch of bad bacteria. So in the times I've done it right and put it out in the garden, even if you put out billions and billions of great bacteria in your garden, it's going to die down to the levels it's meant to be quickly, because you don't have everything out there to support it, right? So it just doesn't, it's almost like taking like extra multivitamins. Oh, great, you're just going to pee it out, Yeah. That's basically kind of what you're doing, I think, with compost tea and worm tea. And there's this Facebook group called the Garden Professors, and there's a number of professors that have written about this. Linda Chalker Scott has a book called How Plants Work that goes into detail about all this too. So just the more I've learned, the more I've just kind of gone back to the keep it simple, stupid, and just put compost and and worm castings on the soil, and then let it rain, basically.
Gotcha.
Let it rain. Wait for it to rain.
Right. So for these onions and this mini, do I still need to fill this pretty close to the top, similar to the other ones?
Yeah, I would fill it all the way to the top. And for that one, you might be able to take one of those bags and just dump it in there. It's probably about the right size. Typically, I'm just like cutting the corner off one of those, and I can pick it up and like dump it in like it's a giant bag of cereal or something.
You tell me that now after I've done this.
Well, the smaller ones you've been doing, it's kind of hard to do that, but this big one is easy to do that. Plus, it looks like you're having a good time getting your hands dirty.
I was having a great time.
Yeah,
and now I'm
don't want to ruin that. Yeah. And see, this is what happens when you go to do this. This is exactly.
See the kind of advice I get.
I ruined everything you had going there. I know.
Also, really glad I put down this little tarp thing. That was a pro move. Didn't even know before I did it. People at home, put down a tarp or do this in your backyard. Yeah, so I guess maybe So the reason I'm using these, at least from my perspective, is because I've put down lawn chemicals for just regular grass. And from what I've seen, you're supposed to wait like a year or so without putting anything down to let that stuff kind of dissipate. You mentioned you just put down like a layer of cardboard and then did everything on top of that.
Wood chips, cardboard,
Wood
and then
chips.
wood chips. Yep.
So could I have just put these anywhere in the backyard? Assuming I didn't have chemicals, could I have just dug a hole and put these in there, or are these bags still beneficial?
Okay, so if you did not have chemicals, you could have just planted them in the ground. The thing you're going to be fighting is Bermuda grass. It is very invasive and will quickly take over an area. So you have to completely dig it out from that whole area. And Bermuda grass roots go down, and you have to get out. Like the thing about Bermuda grass is if you just like cut it at the root, that root is going to produce 2 new plants now. So you have to literally remove all of the roots and everything from it. So you've got to dig down like a foot. Some people say 2 feet. I typically do about a foot. But you've got to dig down a foot all the way around. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, I did it. I tried it on like one garden. I was like, okay, I'm not doing this again. So that's why I was like, I'm just going to cover this whole thing with cardboard and 2 feet of wood chips. And then what happened was the Bermuda grass died off. The cardboard broke down. Worms came up and ate it. And now those wood chips decomposed and turned into great soil. So now that entire backyard is wonderful soil that I can plant anywhere in, just directly into the ground. So I have a mix of my raised beds, my smart pots, and great soil. And in the soil, I'm planting all my perennial stuff like blackberries and fruit trees and stuff that comes back every year. And then all my stuff that turns over every 3 months or whatever, I'm planting in raised beds and in smart pots and stuff like that. But for your situation, I would just put them. I mean, I think you can have them in different places too, like the herbs you're cooking with all the time. Have them outside your wherever you're cooking a lot. You know, if you have somewhere outside of there, even if you mentioned having a table, you can have them up on a table.
Yeah.
On a patio. I'm not sure about the grass situation, like putting on top of that, you know, like we've talked about. I think there's potential where stuff could get like taken up into it. I don't know. I think the stuff that you're buying over the counter from the store isn't the stuff I'm worried about as much as some of the stuff that's sprayed on like industrial agriculture fields. It's way different.
Right.
So I learned this lesson the hard way I was buying horse manure off of Craigslist from this lady that was like, she had a bunch of different horses coming in there that she was working with, like therapeutically and stuff. And some of the horses that were there were grazing on fields that were sprayed with herbicide because there are certain weeds that can hurt or kill horses if they eat it. So these horse ranchers, like, obviously care about their horses and don't want them to be hurt by it. So they're willing to spray whatever on their fields. And what happens is these new herbicides, aminopyrrolid is the one that bit me. It lasts in horse manure. Like after it comes out of the horse, it still lasts like 3 to 4 years. So if you use that horse manure in your garden, then it kills all your plants. So this is the kind of stuff that like, that's a stuff, you know, but like Roundup has a pretty quick half-life. Like I don't remember the exact details on it, but I know it's within a growing season, it's gone. Okay. That's like the number one thing that's used out. There's a lot of other herbicides too, but I think the pesticides I'm more concerned about than the herbicides. So if you've sprayed those down, I'd probably be a little more concerned.
Right. So I went ahead and put the worm castings in here. Assume that's
and that one. Yeah, that one you can fill up, you know, pretty much all the way to the top.
Okay.
Maybe leave again just like an inch for mulch, if that, but it's pretty much going to the top.
So I did the worm castings too soon.
It's okay.
They're gonna get buried a little bit.
Might just add a little more in to top it off. Another thing you can do is I have some worms that are in these big ones, like maybe not the 5 gallons and stuff like that, but in like my big bag bed juniors and the big bag beds, I just have worms in there too.
Little family hanging out.
Yeah. As long as you're adding in new compost, then they have plenty of stuff to eat.
Okay, so you feel like that's about the height we're wanting to get to?
Yeah, I think that's good. And then, so for the onions, oh wait, so you're done with that. And then can you grab the onions and pull them up to the camera and we'll look at those. All right, so these come in these little bundles, and each one of those is a new onion plant. So you're just going to take them out of the bundle, and then you're going to plant them about 2 inches apart anywhere you want to put them. So I would just kind of section off maybe half of that. I don't know. I'm not sure how much you want to do on that. Did you buy chives too, or did you just have onions?
No, I just have these two.
Do you have garlic you're planting in there as well, or are you just doing all onions in there?
So I think last time we talked, you said I could freeze some cloves.
Yeah.
How long did they need to stay frozen?
2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
And did you put them in a bag of soil when you froze them before you put them in?
No, that would have been smart.
Yeah,
so I might have to try again.
Yeah, because I think they can get damaged if they're not like protected by soil. Basically, you want them to mimic the conditions of being in the ground in the winter. So just take like a Ziploc bag, fill it with soil, and then put the garlic in that, and then put that in the freezer. So these onions are going to plant about every 2 inches apart, and I would just fill that whole bed with it. And then when we do garlic, we'll just do a different bed for those, because you're going to have more than enough to fill that with the amount of onions you've got.
Okay. So many.
And the key with onions is to not plant them too deep. So you want them to be kind of just barely in there, and because it's going to develop with the onion on top of the soil. If they're planted too deep, then the onions aren't going to get very big because they're too compacted by the soil. So
can you see this from here? Is it too far?
Yeah, I can kind of see. I mean, I can tell by the motion of what you've been doing that it's okay.
Like these are about like that far apart. I don't know if you can see that. It's probably more than 2 inches apart as well.
Yeah, 2 inches apart from each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are. So how big of a bulb is this going to make? If they're 2 inches apart, wouldn't that be wider than? I guess maybe not.
They're gonna get to the point where they're touching each other when they're done. That's okay though. And they may not get that big. These aren't. I mean, a lot of times they're not going to get near as big as the onions you see in the store, but they're going to taste way better. You're going to harvest them at an earlier stage. They're going to taste better because they're going to have more flavor. It's just a different way of growing onions. Now, some of them still get big. You're going to have like it's hit or miss too. Like some of them will be small, some will be big. Like it's. A lot of it really just comes down to how like deep you plant them too. I think a lot of the ones we end up with that are small were just planted too deeply accidentally.
Okay. So just like enough to get them where they kind of stand up, enough structure to stand them up.
Mm-hmm. And then I think once you move this bed from the garage to wherever it's going to go, all of those are going to fall over. You're going to have to redo a lot of this.
Okay.
So you might want to just wait till you get that one set up where it's going to really like get all this finalized, because
that makes sense.
All the other ones are going to move really easy, the ones with the handles, but that big bag mini, go ahead and try and pick it up for a second. You're going to see what happens. Like it's going to fold in half no matter what you do.
You're going to have to like try and just scoop it.
Yeah. It's tough to move.
Oh no, we lost one. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what you're saying.
If you have a garden cart, like sometimes I've folded it like a taco and put it in a cart before to move it around. But again, all the roots are going to get disturbed. So the 5 gallons, those are going to move. Do you mind picking one of those up and bring it over here to show everyone kind of how those, like that stays in place?
Super handy.
Soil
this is
stays
even
in place.
Using the handles.
Yeah. But those minis, like all those wide ones, like they need to go where they're going to go before you plant them. But now everyone sees how we're doing the onions. So
Yeah, makes sense. Did that on purpose, just for the people.
Well, is there anything else that you think we should talk about, John, or any questions that?
I mean, if you for watering, I mean, you said just soak it. How frequently? Just is it more like how moist should the soil be when I check it?
So the first time you water it, it needs to be completely saturated, like completely soaked, like 100%. And then I would come back and water it every day for the first 3 to 5 days.
Same thing, soak it again.
You're not going to have to soak it as much because it's still going to have a lot. I think you're just going to need just make sure the roots aren't drying out at all, So I think probably I don't know. It's hard to just make sure it gets plenty of water again to kind of get back to the level it was before, but it won't take near as much water. And then after 5 days, start backing off. So now you're going to back off to just watering every 2 days or so. And you can tell by the plant. So the more that you do this, the more that you're going to be able to tell. The leaves will look a little droopy. The soil will look dry. It'll the plant will be telling you I'm thirsty. You just instinctively be able to tell. The basil, and especially the basil, will tell you quickly because those leaves will droop. Things like thyme and oregano are harder to tell because they have those woody stems and they just don't show their stress that much. And also they're not as stressed by not having as much water because they don't need as much water. But the basil will show you pretty quick. It's a good indicator. Sage will show you quicker than the other ones too. So I kind of just look for these indicator plants,
Gotcha. Yeah.
Also, the app will tell you how often each plant needs to be watered once it's established. And established is basically 5 to 10 days,
Okay. Do I need to wait until that 10-day mark or later to take any of it? Let it stay undisturbed?
Yeah, I would probably give it a good 3 weeks before you take any of it. Now you're going to get some of this extra basil that we're going to thin off. And I mean, technically you could take one little sprig off that thyme and one little sprig off the oregano, just so you get the feeling of eating your own oregano and thyme.
Right.
But the more that you take off now, the less that you're going to have a month from now. And a month from now, you should have a lot, a pretty good amount if you just get it going. And then I would put that fish fertilizer on it about probably a week from now. The reason why you don't want to do it right this moment is because the plant needs to get established and a little bit healthy, ready to go before you give it fertilizer, because fertilizer can shock is a bit of a tough word, but it can shock it a little bit, you just don't want to do too many things to it at the same time. Right.
Gotcha.
I mean, which makes sense. You just want to get it it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? But it kind of process everything that just happened to it because it just moved environments, and now you're trying to give it a bunch of food. It's well, hold on, let me get settled. So
yeah.
Anyway, dialogue with my plant. This is what they tell me. So.
Okay.
Exposing my craziness.
No, makes sense. So I'll just move these outside. So these are all full sun. The onions are full sun as well.
Yeah, all of it's going to be full sun. It's just the basil and the dill isn't going to like cold. So make sure you're bringing that in if the temperatures are going to be below 50.
Okay.
And definitely overnight. I would bring them in overnight. Yeah, and then also if it looks like we're going to get like a ton of wind or something, which I'm sure we will anytime around here, like I wouldn't let it just be battered by the wind for a whole day right now. Like let it, you want to expose it to all the different elements gradually. So it's like, here's some rain, here's some wind, here's some, and then just keep exposing it to that until it gets built up. Because if you just throw it out in our 40-mile-an-hour wind days, then that's going to really beat that plant up, and it's not ready for it yet because it's the first time it's ever seen a windstorm in its entire life. Okay. Whereas a plant that grew up like from seed outside its whole life is accustomed to it, so it's going to be fine. Its roots have already built in enough support and structure to be able to hold it up from the wind because it's already dealt with that before.
Gotcha. Okay.
Cool. Well, we'll follow up. I'd love to see once you get this stuff out where it's going to go. Maybe we can follow up here in a couple days and see how it's looking out there and see if any new questions come up. And I'm betting you're going to be planting a lot more stuff soon.
Yeah. No, sounds good. And I'll be taking pictures every day just for fun. But yeah, appreciate all the help. I would have messed this up a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, John. Cool. Well, if anyone has questions, leave comments down below. I think John is talking about maybe doing a write-up of all this too. So hopefully we'll get to see that soon. I think we're going to do a blog post too that talks about like what things you need to buy from Home Depot, what things you need to buy from Lowe's, and all the different places to get started. So everyone, thanks for watching, and let us know if you have any questions.
Bye.